I'd like to say hello to all of our subscribers and listeners. Thank you guys for tuning in to another season of Backpoints Network. I'm here with a Pontiac legend, Coach Brown. He's an electronics school teacher, mentor, leader, varsity head football coach, varsity wrestling coach. To get started, will you talk about your personal memories of how sports became a part of your life?
Corey, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's a pleasure. And thank you for your kind words. Corey, I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia. And my father was a Navy man. He was 30 years in the Navy. He was a Pearl Harbor survivor. So basically, what I'm saying, I kind of grew up almost without a dad. It was 9 months out of a year, sometimes 14, 12 months out of a year. I didn't see my dad. He was overseas. But my first recollection of anything to do with sports was when my dad's ship came in, and he was going to be home for the summer. And they had just organized a little league baseball team, for the kids in our neighborhood. And my dad was one of the coaches. And it's a funny story because baseball wasn't my thing, and my dad made sure I knew that. I couldn't judge a ball if it hit me in the top of my head. But I remember playing after about 4 games, my dad came to me and said, son, I don't think baseball is your sport. Okay. And yeah, he was up front with it. He was rubbing my head while he was telling me that. He said, I got to be honest with you, I think you ought to try something else. That was about maybe 10, 11 years old.
Wow, he was real.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't blame him. I remember praying that they wouldn't hit the ball my way. I was an outfielder. And when they did, the ball would fly 20 yards over my head. And I'm thinking, I'm right under the ball. I'll drop 20 yards in front of me. So he did what was best, I guess, to keep from embarrassing his son. But my younger brother was a heck of a baseball player and ended up on a full scholarship to South Carolina State University on a baseball scholarship. So, but after that point, I didn't have anything to do with sports again until high school. And when I got into high school, I was talked into going out for the football team by some of my friends in my neighborhood. But now listen to who my friends were. Donnie Green was the offensive tackle at Crestwood High School. He ended up full scholarship to Purdue as an offensive tackle.
That's impressive.
And from there, he blocked for O.J. Simpson, number 75 with the Buffalo Bills.
Wow.
My other friend that lived a couple of streets over was Ray Jarvis.
Wow.
Ray Jarvis was a wide receiver out of Crestwood, went to Norfolk State University on a full scholarship, and from Norfolk State was drafted by the Bills as a wide receiver. And I think he ended his last 2 or 3 seasons here in Detroit with the Lions.
Wow.
In my neighborhood was Charlie Stutes.
Okay,
Charlie Stutes was the first black the quarterback at the University of Maryland.
Oh, wow.
He was drafted by the St. Louis Rams.
Okay.
No,
yeah, they were in Rams.
Was it St. Louis? I'm trying to think. It was no, it was a San Francisco. Anyway, it was Los Angeles Rams. Los Angeles Rams.
Okay.
As a defensive back.
Oh, okay.
And he had a storied career with the Rams. So these were the guys I grew up with.
Right.
Guys who were potential NFL players.
Right.
And so we had a decent high school football team. But keep in mind, during that time, we didn't have the playoffs like we have now.
Oh,
okay. You just had your 9-game season and your league, and that was it. But we had an outstanding football team, and that's where I kind of started coming into my own.
Now, what position did you
Well, believe it or not, you have to understand, Corey.
Okay.
Back in the day, guys were small,
Okay.
and I was a defensive tackle.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Can you believe that?
Wow.
At about 160 or 70 pounds, okay? But I love to hit.
Right.
I love hitting, but I was just small. And even until recently, we didn't find offensive linemen, 250, 260 back, right. As a matter of fact, Donnie Green was the biggest thing ever walked through Crestwood High School.
What was he about?
He was about 6'8", 6'7", 6'8", about 280, 290.
Wow.
And and he was one of those kind of guys you don't see very often.
Right.
So I was a small tackle, but because I loved to hit, I was spotted by one of the coaches from a small university in North Carolina,
Okay.
Elizabeth City State University,
Okay.
a little small school, Division III,
Right.
and I went there and I excelled.
That's awesome.
I got a chance to start, and I had an excellent career.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, shifting to you coming to Pontiac
Mhm.
and getting involved with teaching as
Okay.
well as getting involved in the sports and stuff. What sports? Can you talk about what sports you got involved with, and what was your transition like when you came to the city of Pontiac?
It was a big transition coming from the south to the north.
Okay.
It was my senior year in college. I was on my way to breakfast, and the football players knew if we got there early, we got most of the food. You don't go late. So it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. That's when they opened, and right there I'm standing in front of the door.
Yeah.
When this gentleman said, "Hey, fellas," to me and my roommate, I said, "Well, are you guys seniors?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "You want to stop in on the way back?" Well, I didn't know at the time they had a recruiting fair, and his name was Richard Craig. He was the assistant superintendent of human resources for the Pontiac School District.
Oh, wow.
And he said, "Have you ever been to Michigan?" I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "You heard of the Detroit Lions, right?" I said, "Yeah." "And all the cars?" I said, "Yes." "Would you like to come?" I said, "Yeah."
Right.
So he said, "Well, look, let me get a copy of your transcripts and your grades." And he got that, and he sent for me a plane ticket.
Wow.
And I came up here and attended a summer program
Okay.
at Eastern Michigan. And then I was hired in to the Pontiac School District in 1970. Right.
Right. Now, what sports did you coach?
Well, when I got to Pontiac, I was assigned to Eastern Junior High School.
Okay.
And I guess most new teachers were, I suppose. But I was there for a short period of time, and I was drafted into the Vietnam War.
Oh.
When I left home, my lottery number was 2. So I still a pretty good chance of leaving here. But I ended up, when I returned in 1972, they reassigned me to Pontiac Northern High School. They had a position open there. And I was standing at the counter. At that time, you would sign out at the end of the day. And I was signing out when the athletic director, Mr. Hercules Render, walked up to me and asked me, well, he knew I was a football player in college. Would I be interested in working with the football team? And I told him I would be. And he said, and at the end of football season, he asked me if I would be interested in coaching wrestling. And he said, well, you know what? If you just take it until we find somebody, we'd appreciate it.
Okay.
I mean, I usually can't say no to people.
Right.
So I said, well, okay, I'll take it until you find someone. But they did find a guy from Oklahoma State, Dan Kraft, who was a champion for Oklahoma, but he didn't stay.
Okay.
And so at the end of that year, I took over, waiting for them to find somebody else, which never happened. I ended up coaching 20 years later.
Wow.
Yeah, like that.
Okay. Now, mentioning wrestling, can you, I want to say a couple of names, and I want to see what kind of feedback comes back to your mind and your
Okay.
recollection of these particular
Okay.
guys.
Okay.
Recently, we interviewed a man by the name of Johnny Johnson.
Okay.
My understanding is he wrestled on your team and really set the tone for that program. What can you tell us about your recollection of Johnny Johnson?
I can tell you a whole lot about Johnny Johnson. Johnny Johnson was a beast.
Yeah.
He was a beast. He was one of the most aggressive kids I've ever coached. He was confident. He was stable. He knew what he wanted. He was a hard worker. And I tell you, I'll never forget the match for the semifinals between Johnny Johnson and Mike Rodriguez, who was the head coach at that time of Detroit Catholic Central, one of the best programs in the state of Michigan. Still are.
Yeah.
And he was going against his son.
Okay.
And let me tell you, they battled until the very end.
Yeah.
Johnny lost to him, but that kid knew he had been in a fight.
That's it.
You know, he didn't just walk through that tournament.
Right.
So that's what I remember about Johnny. He was aggressive. He was certain of himself, and he knew what he wanted to do.
That's
and he
awesome.
was one of those guys who was a pleasure to coach.
That's awesome. Now, what can you tell us about the Logan family?
Oh, my
I think
God.
it's not just Tyrone, but I
Oh,
mean the
the
Logan family. What?
They go on and on and on and on and on. There's so many Logans I can't count them. But I tell you what I remember about Danny Logan was my first state champion.
Okay.
Danny was a little different than Tyrone.
Okay.
Danny was strong for his weight class. He's 119.
Okay.
He was aggressive, and it came natural to him. He had natural talent. All of Logans did.
Wow.
So Danny was my first state champion, and he was just he wasn't mean, but he was one of those guys who was talented.
Okay.
Tyrone Logan.
Yeah, what can you tell us
Oh,
about
Tyrone was just slick.
Oh, was
He was one of those guys that you knew what he was going to do, but you couldn't stop it.
That's it.
Everybody knew he had the best duck under in the state of Michigan.
Right.
I didn't teach it to him.
Right.
It was just one of those natural moves that Tyrone had. And it took Tyrone to a state championship.
That's it.
But he was slick,
Yeah.
he was fast, and he knew where he was all the time on the mat. And that's what separates a good wrestler from one who's mediocre. You know where you are.
Mad awareness.
That's right. You know exactly where every part of your body is. And so he was able to get in and out of positions that people knew he was going to use, but couldn't stop it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, your recollection, how do you think the athletes, just in general, from the late 70s and early 80s, would match up against the athletes that you had in the 80s and maybe early 90s? What were some of the differences and some of the things that stick out in your mind about that?
You know, Corey, I don't think there was a difference between the kids in the 70s, 80s, and 80s. And here, I'll tell you why. Because we had one thing in common with all those kids. We were going to be aggressive. We were going to work hard. We were going to be gentlemen, okay? And we were going to kick ass.
That's it.
And that was from the time I started coaching until I walked out the door. Be respectful to all your opponents, every man, woman, child you meet. But when you step on the mat, we mean business. They couldn't get on the bus with radios and headphones. You either rested or concentrated on what you wanted to do. So we set the tone for each of those years from the 70s all the way until I left in the 90s. We had those saying, Adam still sings it. We're from Pontiac, you never catch us on our back.
Yes, he still has the kids saying that in the practices right now.
We're from Pontiac, you never catch us on our back. So we had those kind of things. We built pride into our program.
Right.
You have to remember, Corey, we took a lot of kids from, some from dysfunctional families, some from poverty-stricken families. But these kids needed just somebody to say, hey, I believe in you, but here's what you got to do.
Right.
And we felt that we made the program inviting enough that they would want to be a part of that program. So we didn't have problems with our kids when they joined the wrestling team.
Right.
Oh, you weren't going to stay.
Right.
And they knew that.
Right. That's awesome. Now, when most people think back to Pontiac Northern High School, I always remember, you definitely had some receivers and good quarterbacks along the way. But a lot of people remember that you had a strong run game year in and year out. What can you tell us about Adam Polk and Charles Talley?
Well, Adam is part of that Logan family, so he knew he had to perform.
Okay.
He couldn't come home.
Right.
Adam was probably one of the hardest working athletes I've ever coached.
I've heard that.
He and a young man by the name of Richard Bell.
Okay.
Those guys were the kind of guys that would stay after practice, get the extra running in. They didn't slough off during practice. They worked. Adam was aggressive, but he had talent. Right. He was quick. He was fast. Adam, I never forget the game against Saginaw Heritage. We were down 3 touchdowns. Adam scored 4.
Wow.
In the fourth quarter to win that ball game.
Wow.
Adam Polk. And they were kicking out behinds.
Right.
So Adam was one of those kind, and he was also a leader.
Okay.
He would get in that huddle. Once the quarterback called the play, Adam took charge. He knew where the hole was. He knew who needed to block for him, and he would talk to that player. Okay. But he was a leader. Right. So Adam, he knew he had to perform because he was part of that Logan family. But he was always a hard worker and a good man.
Now, what can you tell us about, the neighborhood knows him as Scooby. Charles Talley. He stepped on the scene. Did you have them both in the same backfield,
No,
or were
that
they?
was later.
Okay.
But I tell you who I did have in the same backfield:
Okay.
Charles Talley,
Mm-hmm.
who went to Northern Illinois out of high school,
Right.
and from there I think he had a short stint with the Cowboys.
Right.
And Ed Watson.
Ed Watson.
Ed
That's
Watson
right.
was in that backfield with Talley
Purdue.
at Purdue,
Right.
and he had a short stint with Green Bay.
Right.
I watched them both on TV during preseason.
Right.
So we had guys that were now the running backs. I can compare the running backs in the 70s, 80s with ones in the 80s and 90s.
Okay. Well, how would you?
They were smaller
Okay.
in the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
We had scat backs,
Okay.
guys like Pepe Barge.
Okay.
Pepe wrestled 112 for me,
Wow.
112-pound weight class.
Wow.
So at his heaviest, he was maybe 125, 130 doing football. But he was so fast. Varsity. But he was so fast and so quick. So we had the small fast backs. That's
Right.
why we ran a lot of that Houston veer,
Right.
the option type offense,
Okay.
where these backs could pick a hole.
Okay.
But in the late 80s and 90s, our backs got bigger. What would have been linemen
Uh-huh.
during the 70s and 80s were running backs in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
Charles Talley was 220.
Yeah, it's a big.
Ed Watson was 215, 220.
Right.
Look at the fellow from Central,
Lewis Adams.
Lewis Adams.
Right.
When a couple of years before I retired, Corey, the Northern Central game was always a big game.
Right.
And I never forget, Watson had graduated the year before. We had Scooby, Charles Talley, and they had Lewis Adams.
Lewis Adams.
They sold Wisner Stadium out.
Oh yeah.
I never forget coming out of the dugout, out of the locker room, there was standing room in the end zone.
Yeah.
People came to see those two guys. And this is what was so funny.
Okay.
Scuba never played defense. He did that game.
You did that.
Because I had him keying Lewis Adams.
Okay.
And Lewis Adams was on defense for Central. That's the kind of rivalry we had. Okay. And neither one of those guys were defensive ball players.
Right.
They were runners.
Right. But they was competitive.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Never got tired. So
Wow.
Those are the days I'll always remember.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, sticking with the theme of football, recently, you get a lot of people that are conscious of the head contacts and stuff, and they've actually sort of banned a drill that was really, really used by a lot of coaches called the Oklahoma drill. What is your opinion on that? Do you think that it's a good decision? And this is just based upon your perspective,
Sure.
your opinion.
I have both pros and cons, Corey. The pros is that what I liked about the Oklahoma drill, especially the one-on-one between the bags, is that it gave us a chance to look at an individual player, one-on-one. Then we go two-on-one. But my biggest concern with the Oklahoma drill was the contact from any direction, called the bull in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
You put a guy in there and you're trying to make him alert and be aware of the players around him. So guys are coming in from different angles, delivering blows. That we didn't use too much. But the one-on-one and the two-on-one between the bag drills, we did use, and I didn't see anything wrong with it. My concern, even at that time, was the headbutting. Even before we became aware of the kind of hit injuries we have now.
Mm-hmm.
But I have both pros and cons about the Oklahoma drill.
That's awesome. Now, moving forward, now you touched on it a little bit when you talked about, how the community really came out for some of the games at Wisner. Did you feel, when you look back, did you feel like the community in Pontiac supported your program?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I couldn't have asked for better community support.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you an example, Corey, of what we did to build that support. For wrestling, we had posters of all the state placers made up very nicely and put around the building.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody knew who those kids were. Teachers got a list of who was on the football team and who was on the wrestling team.
Okay.
And that was because I wanted to know if there were any problems.
Right.
All right. So they all knew who the football players were. The football players also had to wear a shirt and tie as the wrestlers on game day.
Right.
A lot of those guys didn't have shirt and ties. So teachers would bring in old ties their husbands weren't wearing anymore and donate them to the football team so they knew
Right.
who the players were.
Right.
In wrestling, we did something that I don't think has been done in Michigan. I ordered a spotlight like you would find in a boxing arena.
Okay.
and had them install an electrical socket
Wow.
in the gym.
Okay.
And on meet nights, we would hang that light, turn off all the lights in the gym, and we spotlighted the two guys on the mat.
On the mat.
Everybody wanted to join the
It's
team.
exciting.
Everybody wanted to come out because you hadn't seen that.
They
You
want to be under that light.
Absolutely. And we had a big end with a white light with a big end for Northern on it. So those are the things we did to bring excitement to the student body and bring excitement to the community.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, I want to switch gears. What were your expectations of your athletes off of the mat in terms of academics? How much of a priority was that for you?
That was number one for me.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. I came from a military family. My dad was 30 years in the Navy. We had to toe the line.
Right.
I didn't understand it, Corey, at the time. But as I got older, I understood what respect meant. Yes, sir. No, sir. Being respectful to everybody. And that's what I demanded from my players. I didn't care how good you were.
Right.
If you had trouble in the classroom,
Right.
if you were being disrespectful, you couldn't play for me. And they all knew that. I used to tell my players that I will come to your defense if you're being mistreated in a game, which I had happen. And you come back and tell me let me fight your battles. But you are to maintain respect as a player and an athlete. And that was because they were representing not only the football and wrestling team, they were representing Pontiac Northern High School. They were representing their parents. They were representing their community. And we weren't going to have this blowout in a ball game or blowout here or disrespect there. Didn't play that, and everybody knew it. They all knew it.
That's awesome. Now, I want to go back one more time because, the old Pontiac Silverdome is no longer there. But my understanding is that you guys didn't you play some city championships
The last
there?
game of the season was always Pontiac Silverdome.
What can you tell us about your memories of playing in the Silverdome?
I don't think we ever lost a game in the Silverdome to Central. Now, I'm 71 years old. My memory is fading a little bit, but I don't remember losing a game. And I'll tell you, of all the teams that we play, of course, your crosstown rival is always the best. Right. And when we had the opportunity to play a couple of years in the Silverdome, we took advantage of it.
Right.
We took advantage of it. But no, I don't think we lost to Central in the Silverdome.
That's awesome. Now, in closing, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. How's things going for you now? What are you up to now? You play golf or you?
Corey, I'm miserable.
Wow.
I mean, everybody looks forward to retirement. I'm miserable as hell. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm used to always doing something, being around people. And retirement is just not my cup of tea. I don't golf. I couldn't hit the ball. I could throw the ball farther than I can hit it.
Okay.
Bowling. I hate bowling.
What about bingo?
No, man. If you catch me in a bingo game, you shoot me. Okay? Take me out of my misery. All those things that we associate with old timers, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Because I like being active. I like going and meeting people and doing things with people. So, no, I'm just.
What about traveling? You get a chance to do any traveling?
It costs too much money. And the funny part is that I hate to fly. I'm afraid to fly. Always have been.
Okay.
So the wife is upset because she wants to go places. Well, we got to fly there. I'm not driving 5 days to California. I'm not getting on the plane.
Right.
But occasionally I do.
Okay.
I visit my family, my sisters and brothers in D.C. and in Virginia. Okay. And I have nephews and grandkids now in Pennsylvania and Georgia. Okay. So we get in the car. As a matter of fact, we're going down to Virginia. We're going to stop and see my older sister, and then head down to Georgia and spend some time with the grandkids. And they're taking us to Disney land. Okay. Yeah, so I've never been, and the wife has never been there. So that's about as much enjoyment as I'm going to get. Okay.
Well, I appreciate it. I really do. Is there anything you want to say to the people? We have a nice platform. It's called Backpoints Network. A lot of the local people, I think the old league was the Gold League.
That's right.
So a lot of those teams, your Oxfords, your Lake Orions, your Waterfords, they tune in. And is there anything you want to say in closing?
There is. First of all, none of us got where we are by ourselves. We always had help.
That's right.
And I want to say to the community of Pontiac, they were fantastic when I was coaching and teaching at Pontiac North. But I also want to give credit to other coaches, guys like Steve Zabel from Pontiac Central, Tim Fagan from Lake Orion High School, Monty Malington from Lake Orion High School, Tom Kroll from Stevenson High School, gentleman Waterford Mott, Denny Purcell from Waterford Mott High School, and Brother Rice, John Major from Brother Rice. Those were the guys that when I started, I looked up to and I learned from, and they were willing to teach me. You know, it's one thing about the sport of wrestling, it's kind of like a family. You compete hard, but when it's over, you're friends. And so I miss those guys. That's what I miss most about my career is having the opportunity to not only work with, but compete against those guys. So I want to thank God for bringing them into my life and all the families that allowed me the opportunity to coach their kids.
That's awesome. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Corey.
And I hope you have a good day.
Thank you.